Hello, everyone. Welcome to JMac Investing. My name is Jason. Obviously, thanks for coming back to another episode. Today, we have a special treat. Have a CEO of a company that is coming public via a SPAC. Obviously, if you're on my channel, and so today we have the CEO of Lightning eMotors, Tim Reeser. Welcome, Tim. How are you doing?
Thank you, Jason. I'm doing really well. Excited to be here and honored to be here. Thanks for taking the time.
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks. I know you're a busy man with everything going on. I'm sure with going through this whole process. So thanks for taking the time.
Yes.
Okay, so I guess let's just kind of break the ice with that. How has this process gone for you? I do like to. I've had on a few CEOs that I went through this process. One of my early ones was Thomas Healy. I interviewed him before they went public, and then after. So I got his perspective on both. So how has the SPACing process been for you?
Yeah, I think it's been interesting to watch, and I've watched what your shows, and you kind of see this evolution of the folks who went early, and now those of us that are going later, and even watching some of our friends that have gone after us. It has certainly evolved, and I'll say the due diligence expectations throughout the process have been much deeper than the people who went before us. So we went through a much more intensive due diligence process with the PIPE investors and with the IPO investor and with the GigCapital3 team before they went forward. So that was interesting to watch kind of this evolution of how different SPACs, how the SPAC market has evolved. And I think that should give people some more confidence on it. That certainly there were some of the early ones who went to kind of slid right through. And I think a lot less of that is happening today. It's certainly with us, there was an intense amount of due diligence, a lot of customer calls with our customers, a lot of deep dive into our sales pipeline, deep dive into our order pipeline, deep dive into our margins. So from that perspective, that was tough, but I was happy to go through it because we want to be legitimized, we want to be credentialized. So I was happy actually to go through that process and for them to push us through. So it was certainly more work, I think, than we were led to believe early on. But I felt it was value add work for everybody to really make sure that people understood what we were doing. It also brought us up to speed very quickly on what it was going to be like to be a public company, which I think is the other, because the advantage of SPAC, of course, is it's fast. The disadvantage is once you're done, you have to quickly grow up. You've got to be ready to do public company reporting and public company auditing. And so GigCapital3 has been a tremendous help to us to help us through that process. The executives there have run public companies, they've taken companies public, and now they've done this. We're their third SPAC. So that was another advantage of SPAC, was having really a lot of help in that process of how do you put together really good governance, how do you put together a really good board, how do you make sure your audits are getting it through the S4s, and all those sort of things that needed to happen to be legitimate and to accelerate at the pace we're trying to accelerate. So I'd say it's been tough in a good way, but I'm happy with the process. I wouldn't change anything about it. We feel very good about how we're coming into the market and how we're ready to be public.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's for sure, as you said, from some of the earlier SPACs to now, companies like yourself coming. It is nice to begin to see some of these a little bit more mature companies with actually some revenue on the book. So, and you guys also do, which maybe we'll get into a little bit later. But it's good to see some mature companies like yourself coming public here. So I wanted to start off also by just kind of diving in right into kind of your business model and the things that you do over at Lightning eMotors. And I wanted to see if you could clarify in layman's terms. I actually opened this up as I usually do to my audience, and I've got, like I was telling you offline, of a audience, well, a private Discord of around 900 investors, and they're mostly all SPAC investors. So I usually, that's the wonderful thing about SPACs is you don't know about a company until they actually get the target, and then the due diligence begins. So we dig in, and in my particular group there, I poll them, and we begin to try to pick apart companies, right? So, and in your case, I think one of the top questions was, just because of the crowded market was with EVs, it's hard to kind of differentiate what everyone is doing like really getting down into the nuts and bolts of what is actually going on behind the scenes. So that's what I wanted to get to see if you would elaborate in layman's terms. What exactly does Lightning eMotors produce?
So I think it's important, Jason, to start when we think about commercial vehicles and lay a context of the vehicles we go after, because that'll help people differentiate. So we go after the medium duty, which we'll often call class 3 to 7, but in layman terms, that's when the first set of vehicles, a class 3 is almost always a dually. So when you see a dually van, a dually truck, usually that's a class 3, all the way to something like a motor coach that can be class 7, 8, and the things in between. When you see refrigerated box trucks that might be, 7-Eleven or DHL, or you see, and almost all of them are single axle dualies at the top end. So we aren't talking about class 2, the smaller delivery vans you see, and that many folks like Arrival and Rivian are talking about in the class 2 delivery vans. And we aren't talking about tractor trailers. So we're the in between. But the other nuance about the in between is the in betweens are also where there's a lot of customization. So you think about something like we just announced yesterday, the City of Porterville vans. All of those have wheelchair lifts on them. Many of those other vans also, they replace the van door with a bifold bus door. So the doors are different, which makes putting batteries in them difficult. And so many people don't recognize that when you get into this medium duty space, you're in a highly customized lower volume space. So it isn't a space when people say, well, why doesn't Ford do it? Ford's never made passenger buses. They've never made, or at least not in the last 10 or 15 years. They don't make shuttle buses. They don't make ambulances, because all of those require a lot of customization, and thus they're segmented in lower volume. So when you think about what the Rivians and the Fords are doing, and GM, they're doing class 2s where there's not a lot of customization, and they can do very high volumes, build very expensive automation plants, and do high volume. Same thing when you think about Volvo, and even where Tesla's going with the class 8s, it's kind of a one size fits all when you get into a big class 8 tractor trailer. They all can look the same, act the same, and so you can build them in a high volume, spend a lot of money on a high volume factory, and build a high volume factory. When you get in this medium space, it's low volume, it's medium volume, it's a lot of customization. So what Lightning has done is said, we want to specialize in that area, and we want to be good at it. We want to make good margins in it. And in fact, there's not a lot of competitors, because it's not as sexy a space, and it's a harder space. When every customer comes to you and wants something slightly different, you think about even two different tow trucks can be totally different. So even when you say tow trucks, the wiring harness, it can be totally different tow truck to tow truck. Is this a big tow truck that's towing a class 8? Is this a little tow truck that's towing cars? Different amount of battery, different amount of wire harness on the different motor. So what we've done is build this very highly customized modular. We pull from our software suite and our hardware suite, what motor do we need, what transmission do we need, and so we go to a customer and say, what do you need? And that customer says that, I'm working with one right now. He says, I need 1,000 shredder trucks. These are trucks that have a shredder in the back. They do, recycle or handle paper for customers. And a lot of people don't realize there's 1,000 of them, but it's not 100,000. It's not 100. It's 1,000 shredder company. So we then say, okay, let's look at what you need. And they say, well, that truck we already know what shredders we use. We already know what box we buy. And all of that ecosystem requires a chassis they already know about. So they say, Tim, we always put it on, for example, a Hino chassis. So we then source the Hino chassis. We build a powertrain in our factory complete. And when I say a powertrain, it's not just a battery and motor. It's battery, motor. It's all of the equipment that makes a shredder work. It's all the equipment that makes the heating, air conditioning, power steering, air brakes. All of that stuff still has to work and work seamlessly and work elegantly in the vehicle. So we build the powertrain and we install that in a Hino. And then we have all the software integration for how it works with a Hino, and all the safety systems work. We replace, for example, the dash system is entirely replaced. Many of the interior systems are entirely replaced so that everything works and feels right as an electric vehicle. But the advantage of being on that Hino platform is the rest of the ecosystem works. So when we hear people out there saying, oh, it's better to build a ground up, again, this is a key differentiator. In the commercial vehicle space, ground up not only doesn't have an advantage, because historically passenger vehicles did ground up because they needed a place to put batteries, and a gasoline car didn't have a place to put batteries. But in the truck space, we have plenty of place to put batteries. So we don't need ground up to make it work well. Instead, the advantage of using what I call a legacy chassis is that all the ecosystem for the upfit exists. The people who make boxes, the people who make lifts, the people who make shredders, the people who make air conditioning systems, the people who make chillers, all of that is key in this space. When you think about an ambulance, there's a whole ambulance upfit. And if we tried to build a ground up chassis, none of that ambulance upfit would work. So we take a chassis from Ford, a chassis from Hino, a chassis from GM, a chassis from Isuzu, where there's already a nice ecosystem. The other part about using that legacy chassis when we start is it already has EPA certifications, it already has safety NHTSA certifications, already has FMVSS certifications. Those things take 2 to 3 years to go get. So we start out of the gate with a chassis that's certified, a chassis that has service and support already. If you run into a pothole and break a ball joint, you can get a ball joint from anywhere in the United States for a 450 chassis. So all of these advantages of using this legacy chassis, we start with the chassis, we then install our powertrain in that chassis, we do all the work on the interior and exterior and install the equipment. So then the customer gets a completed, assembled, ready to go, fully service in place, fully spare parts in place vehicle with all of their custom upfits and parts they need to go do that vocation they need to do.
Now, is this new only, or can someone come with you with their existing fleet?
So that's a fun part about our business. Because we separate in our manufacturing facility, we make powertrains in one side and we assemble them in the other. We do have customers that come to us and say, "Can you repower?" And so, for example, we had announced ABC Coach. They sell new coaches, but they also have a big business on servicing the coaches. For example, Google has 500 coaches on their campus in Silicon Valley. So there's a lot of these out there. And when you think about the opportunity, many of those coaches, they're stainless steel bodies. If you've ever looked at them, they're built extraordinarily solidly. They're $1 million out of the gate. And most of the time they go through 3 to 5 powertrains in their lifetime. They get repowered, historically diesel. So ABC came to us and said, "Hey, instead of putting new diesel powertrains, these big customers of ours would rather put electric powertrains in them." So we build the powertrain here and we ship it to them, and they have big service centers where they already do repowers, historically diesel, and now they install our electric powertrain. So it's cost compelling. It's got a great sustainability story because you didn't have to throw away that beast or find a place to store, a
Right.
huge motor coach that is end of life. Instead, we extend that life. So it's got a great sustainability play. It's got a lot of people said, well, once you're done, eventually that business goes away. But in fact, many of these coaches can be on the road for 30 years, and it's not unusual for them to be on the road a long time. So they'll be repowered multiple times, and we see a real benefit to our repower business. So it is part of the business to repower. We also have customers send us we have OEM customers that we sell. They have a new vehicle, but they want us to send them a powertrain and they install it at their factory. So we have all three businesses, meaning we do the whole assembly here. We just send a powertrain to OEM partners, or we send a powertrain to a repower partner. So all three of those are revenue streams for us. And we think all three of them have long-term legs and each have their own benefits and places.
Right, and you guys also provide software, obviously, to the monitoring and things like that, right? Is that
Yes.
is that an add-on service, or is that something that is included?
Yeah, it is an add-on service because in the commercial vehicle space, these customers rely on data, and in fact, they're accustomed to paying for telematics and analytics, and so we charge a yearly fee for the telematics and analytics, and the customer gets not only gets all the data from that, but they also get our analysis from it. So it's not unusual for us to say, "Hey, it looks like driver one is doing a whole lot better with brake regen than driver two. You should consider, a training program for these sets of drivers." Or we'll look at it and say, if you want to now begin expanding your fleet to a much colder environment, here's going to be the impact on range. We should put more battery modules in the one that you're sending to Minneapolis versus the one in San Diego. Or we have other customers say, "Hey, we're looking at adding more pallets to the back and doing more payload. How does that impact our range?" And we have the data to be able to show them, okay, that's going to impact your range this way. Or they'll say, "We're going to add more stops, and so the lift gate is going to run more often. How's that going to impact our range?" And so we have all of that data. And a lot of that wasn't absolutely important. Most of these customers used analytics and telematics in the past just to know where the vehicle was. Now they want to know, range. And with electrification, it's very key. You don't want, they don't want us to overspec batteries in these vehicles. If you know that vehicle drives 80 miles every day, you don't want to put 200 miles worth of batteries because you take a payload hit as well as a cost hit. So a lot of people, again, when they think about passenger cars, the only trade-off for more batteries was cost. But in trucks, there's a big trade-off for more batteries in terms of payload. So you don't want to overspec these vehicles, and you don't want to underspec them. And so our very high resolution telematics and analytics have helped us and allowed us to work with these customers to scale their fleets and understand the impact as they look at different geographies, different hilly areas, different weather, different payloads.
Great. Is that vary from in the contract, the cost for the
Yes.
fleet? Is it vary, or is it fairly
Yeah, so
standard?
yeah, with like so many other things, if you have big fleets with a lot of volume, then our cost to service somebody who's got 1,000 vehicles and provide them the reports is much less per vehicle. So if somebody's got a lot of volume, then the cost goes down on the telematics and analytics. If somebody's just buying one, and for example, if somebody's got a grant that requires us to do a lot of reporting from the telematics on the grant, we do all of that as a full service. But then, of course, it costs more money to do one of those and have a lot of high touch with it than it does to do 1,000 of them and spread it across.
Got you. Yeah, very good. And I guess it also is probably beneficial because you can, by doing it that way, you can constantly be upgrading and pushing updates when need be, right? I mean,
Yeah, and also predictive maintenance, which is so we've had a couple customers because the telematics tell us things like if there's been a drop across the cooling pump. And again, in most of these commercial vehicles, to have a high quality commercial vehicle, you do have cooling for the batteries and heating for the batteries and cooling for the electronic components because that's the way you get real long life. It costs more, but it's the way to do it. But things like cooling pumps, you want to know if you've had a leak in the line or if they hit a pothole and broke a cooling line. Because we're watching all of that in 1 second resolution, we actually know if there's been a decrease and we get an alert that, hey, this vehicle's had a significant decrease in water pressure across the pump. We then call the customer and say, hey, you should ground that vehicle as soon as it gets back to depot, and we'll send a rep to take care of it. So these are areas where, again, when you think about commercial operators who are many times running 7x24, these vehicles have to be up, very different from passenger vehicles in terms of service and support and expectations. A part of that is having great telematics where we know ahead of time what's going on with that vehicle and can tell customers how to take care of it. And they've never had that in the diesel world and the gasoline world. They never had this kind of high touch predictive maintenance and predictive service that we have. So it's another advantage they're seeing with electrification over their legacy products.
data is the new gold, right?
It is absolutely. Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's great, good stuff there. Good insights there. Um, so we often hear that the spacking process, which before you become a target, I'm sure more eyes get on the company, and it helps bring more awareness to your company product lineup. Have you seen that thus far in your process?
Yes, yeah, absolutely, and obviously it's a great thing to have a little bigger platform and a little both from the customer base and the investor base to have more people knowing about you or hearing about you, and more when you put out a press release, more coverage on the press release. And so we've seen a very significant increase in website traffic, and very excited about it because it gives us a lot more opportunity to talk about what we're doing. Obviously, there's a lot more SEC constraints around. You have to be a lot more careful about what you say. You're going to be held accountable, and there's a lot of eyes watching and ready to catch you if ready to make fun of you if you don't get it right. So from that perspective, there's certainly the other side. There's a lot more accountability. But again, when you're working to really be legit and you are legit, the accountability actually is a great thing. It's not a bother. So, but it has absolutely increased the platform. The other thing it's done, Jason, is also from a credibility on two instances. One of them is when you're private, a lot of the customers have concerns about your long-term viability. So many of our big fleet customers, literally, there was 3 or 4 of them that said, Tim, we love your product. We've test driven it for 3 years. We're very happy with it, but we can't scale up without knowing you've got a big balance sheet and you're going to be here a long time. And so as a private company, that's tough. And the same thing on the supply chain side as we started scaling up and saying, okay, we need to buy a lot of batteries and we need to buy a lot of air conditioning, electric air conditioners, and et cetera. And those companies would say, we can't give you good terms because you don't have a big balance sheet, you're not public. And so being public and going public has given us a platform to also have a lot more credential and credibility with the customers we're working with to scale. Because when you have customers come to you and say, this happened about a year ago, they were buying prototypes or buying 5 or 10, and it was kind of a science project. And when they come and say, Tim, we're talking about 10,000, can you do it? When you're not public, it's tough to convince them you can. And now they see we've got a balance sheet. They see we've got viability. They see we're public. They now have a lot more faith that we can scale at the rate and the speed they want us to scale. And the same thing on the supply chain side. So it's helped us not just in press, PR, but also in credibility with customers and supply chain.
Great, that's awesome. Um, so I guess number two that the my Discord group wanted to know about. It was funny, just to give you a little inside story here. When I polled them, one of the main things was get clarification on what is actually going on with the electrification end of the business. But then the other one was, how do you guys plan on being able to expand? And then the same day you announced the manufacturing plant, the expansion plans. And so I was like, okay, well, that one's a check. So can you talk a little bit about that? How's that going, and what's the timeline for that expansion?
Certainly. So I was just walking the new building B. And there's a couple parts of building B that I think are important. One of them is, just having the space is important because we've got everything we need today to meet 2021. So this is important because we see a lot of folks out there say, hey, we're going to build a plant and do all our testing and do all this in 3 months. And it just takes a lot longer than that, as most of your viewers know. And so when we say we're ready to do 2021, that this facility we're in today, that we built this manufacturing site of this over a year ago, we have all the capacity to build 2021 numbers today. So what we're talking about now is building capacity for 2022 and beyond. And that's a function of both having the facilities. It's also a function of having some additional automation and process and procedure, because we don't plan on linearly scaling, meaning every new unit doesn't require an extension 1 unit of facility. There's a lot of automation potential, but it's unique automation in the sense that it's not going to look like a Tesla factory, because we're not automating for 300,000 units. Again, we're playing in this go build 100 or go build 1,000, and each one of then when you build the next 1,000, one of them might be these shredder trucks, and the next one might be a tow truck, and the next one might be a shuttle bus, and the next one might be an ambulance. So you have to have a very flexible look at automation, but there's some real opportunity now. Robotics and automation has come a long ways just in the last 2 years. So we have a real opportunity to do some innovation there without having to invent something new per se. So you'll see us talk about a variety of ways that we're able to make things significantly faster and more efficiently. But again, you won't see pictures with 1,000 pick and place robots, because that's not what the business is. But you will see pictures with some unique things we're doing. And already, this year we've already added all our own metal fab through laser cutting and our own powder coating and et cetera. So there's a lot of stuff we're insourcing to speed up the process, and a lot of stuff that we're adding process and automation to improve it. So it's both a function of having more space, but also a function of having the process and the procedure, and all that's happening. I'm very, very confident that we don't have to invent anything. We don't have to get lucky to make it all happen for 2022. We just have to continue, doing the work and buying the things, making the capital equipment purchases that need to be made.
You got any 3D metal printers over there?
Yes. So we're just placing orders for those too. So I'm a big fan of 3D printing, and obviously that's a big market in the sense there's metal, there's plastic, there's high volume, there's low volume, there's stuff you do for engineering prototyping and stuff you do for production, and all of that, because again we're in this low to medium volume. There's a real opportunity for that kind of technology to significantly accelerate and lower our costs both. Whereas before, if the CAD person would design it, when you can print it here, you send it right here and you have it. If you have to then send it out of house, a procurement person has to go spec it. A procurement person has to get all the exact dimensions to somebody. You have to get 10 bids. You get a bid back. You have to order it. It might be 6-week lead time. You have to get it in. Then you have to send it out to powder coat. And so when you think about the advantages of insourcing, anything from a 3D printer or anything from laser cutting, it's a dramatic improvement in speed. And that's obviously part of the way we're getting to this non-linear growth you see ahead of us.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, makes sense, especially with, like you said, all of the customization and having something like that. So having some of those automated processes in place makes all kinds of sense. Let's see. So, from your perspective, what's going to set you apart from all of the any other competitors that are in your lineup? Not getting into the Teslas of
Right.
the world and
Oh, exactly. Yeah. So the biggest thing is we'll stay true to our form and we'll do these unique things that truthfully no one else wants. When you see everybody else, most of the people who've announced, either they do a very small segment of what we do. We're the only people who do all the segments, and we figured out how to use, our supply chain and our modularization to be cost effective at lots of different kinds of vehicles. And when you look at our assembly line, it can do all of them. So one aspect is we do the vehicles no one else wants to do. So that's one part of competition. The other part is we've been doing it now. We've been in business 12 years. We've been doing electric and fuel cell electric vehicles for 3 years. We have more vehicles on the road than anybody. So when you get those vehicles on the road, you learn a lot, and everybody's going to learn a lot from the first vehicles you put on the road. And you don't learn, it's not just the first month, it's the first 2 years you learn a lot about reliability. You learn a lot about data. You learn a lot about how these vehicles are used. So this, aside from, yes, we do the kinds of vehicles no one else is doing, we also are furthest ahead of everybody in understanding what it really costs, what the customer's expectations are, how do you have a service and support network. We have all of that. Most of our competitors are still learning what they don't know. So I think that's another key place we see ourselves out there. And that's true both in terms of product and it's true in terms of manufacturing, already having manufacturing set up, already having product ready to go and in customers' hands. So I think those are two succinct areas where we'll continue to differentiate ourselves and execute and be very, very good at what we do.
excellent. I noticed you added President Biden and trying to get in on some of this electrification fleet. Any feedback from him yet?
Not directly from him, but from the market, yes. So as you know, there's 640,000, this widely touted federal vehicles. We just announced yesterday another, sale to a city of Porterville yesterday, buying our vans for microtransit. These are class 3 vans, and there's a lot of interest. So we've always understood how to sell to cities and states, and obviously, state of California is a big customer of ours, through a variety of California state hospitals and many others. So we've sold to the governments for a while. The federal government has been slow historically, so this is net new business for everybody out there. And that the federal government has very few, if any, electric vehicles. So when they announce they're going to do it, it's big. Of that 640,000 vehicles, 110,000 approximately are in our space. These medium duty that we have, in many cases, we're the only people who do that. So when you look at a cherry picker and you look at some of the military vehicles that are very unique, we have that ability to service that 110,000 of them that are very unique. So to put that in perspective, when our 2025 numbers are somewhere around between 20 and 25,000 vehicles a year, when the federal government alone is doing 100,000 vehicles, there's a real opportunity. And because, again, we can do it as repower, we can do it on any platform, our flexibility to pick up a significant amount of that business. Certainly, the cars and the pickup trucks are going to be other people's business, and we're excited for the other folks in the market who will pick up that business. But we believe in that 110,000 units of medium duty space. We are the people to beat in that space.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm sure. Sure you're chomping at the bit for that because that is huge. And I guess I should have said at the beginning, but I'll drop it in the description that full disclosure, I am also invested in GIK, so I'm an investor. So I'm most certainly rooting for you in all aspects and all areas to get all these contracts. So
I appreciate it very much. We'll take all the support we can. So I truly appreciate it.
yes, sir. So if you could maybe expound on, I don't know if I haven't seen you talk about it in any other interviews, but it's on your slide deck. Can you talk a little bit about the Plug Power partnership that you got
Yes.
going on with the fuel cell?
Yeah, so when we talk about, as I mentioned earlier, this modularity. So when we think about a vehicle, we have a number of battery modules or packs that go on that vehicle, and we build a powertrain. So when we think about fuel cell, we think about it in the same way. It has the exact same, and many people don't understand this, but the actual powertrain itself. So when you think about the motors, the transmissions, the heating, cooling, air conditioning, power steering, air brakes, compressors, all of that is the same, whether it's going to be fuel cell or whether it's going to be battery electric. So we start out with this battery electric vehicle. And then when somebody says, I want a fuel cell vehicle, we remove some battery modules. We put on the fuel cell battery modules from Plug Power. It gets some tanks to store the high pressure hydrogen. And from our standpoint, it looks the same. It's still a modular zero emission vehicle. So it just happens to be fuel cell instead of battery electric. So we look at the base of what we build is the same. The base drivetrain component and all of that is the same. The control system's the same. We just add the control system modules to keep track of the hydrogen and the fuel cell, as opposed to looking at the battery condition. Plug Power has been an extraordinary partner. They, as many people know, they have I believe last I saw, a little over 25,000 forklifts in customers, big customers like you'd think about. It's highly publicized. Amazon, Walmart are big customers of theirs. So when you think about those customers, they already have hydrogen infrastructure. They can already fuel up hydrogen because they have to fuel up their forklifts. So many of those customers are saying, they've got the need for medium duty trucks that go from depot to depot. And so if you're going to go depot to depot, you need a lot of range, you need a lot of payload. It's virtually impossible to do that, to get the range and payload combination somebody needs on a battery electric vehicle. And so going to hydrogen makes sense from a technology standpoint, because you need it to meet payload and range in these requirements, for example, for class 6. But the part that is unique is many of these companies already have hydrogen at those facilities. So unlike the over the road situation where you have to go build hydrogen facilities every 300 miles along every interstate and every non-interstate throughout the United States, we don't have that infrastructure challenge for these kind of customers that are already running Plug Power forklifts. So it's a partnership made in heaven, in the sense that Plug is a great partner, really good people, always been impressed with them. But they already have customers that already have infrastructure. They want to grow in this space by beginning to offer a broader transportation opportunity, and we provide the powertrains to make that happen. And again, many of those customers want to start with a Hino, or they want to start with, they have a platform they want to use because they've already built a perfect box and a perfect pallet system and a perfect refrigeration system, or whatever that is, on top of that platform. And those platforms already have the safety requirements they have. So for them to be able to go to Plug and us and say, hey, we just need a powertrain on top of a Hino or on top of an Isuzu, and for us to have that already and be able to do that in this kind of modular fashion and give it to them as a BEV or an FCEV, it's really a great place to be. So we are shipping those already. So we're shipping fuel cell electric vehicles today already, in partnership with Plug Power, and I see that as a growing business. But it'll always be a bit, into this certain segment. I don't see it taking over the world. Because the world doesn't have fuel cell infrastructure around every corner. But for these customers that do have fuel cell, it makes a great deal of sense, and it's a great solution.
Gotcha. So you're saying that it's a partnership, a lot to do with Plug Power's already existing forklift customers that have that infrastructure for
Exactly.
their forklifts. All
That's
right,
right.
that's
Yep.
interesting. Interesting angle. I haven't heard that one yet. That's pretty cool. Let's see. I guess so. Yeah, I think we're kind of running a little long here, so I guess we can close it down. Any thoughts on what's going on with GameStop? I know this is off script, but and I
Yeah,
don't mean to
yeah.
put you on the spot, but
I'm fascinated. Of course, part of it, is going through the SPAC process, becoming public. You learn a whole lot about the inside, how the inner workings of the market work, and it's fascinating. But part of what I like seeing, power to the people. I think the stuff you're doing, Jason, and educating the people. That the market eventually, what I keep finding is the market's finding a way to educate itself through folks like you and others, and the market eventually trues things up. So I've become a believer in letting the market true itself up, and I just grab the popcorn and watch.
absolutely, absolutely. That's awesome. Yeah, like I said, I like I said, I'll put my disclosure, in the description. But definitely rooting for you guys, and I really appreciate you coming on, taking time to hopefully give some more insights into why I think you guys are going to succeed. So, any last thoughts before we drop?
No, I appreciate the time. I know I've gone long for you, so will let you. I know you probably get to edit it already. So thank you again, Jason. True pleasure. And anything I can do anytime, let us know. Love to be back and love to answer any questions along the way.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's follow up once you finally go public.
Excellent. Thank you,
Thank,
Jason. Have a great
thank
day.
you. Thank you, Tim. Have a good one.
Take care.
All right.